There comes a time in every person's journey when the mirror no longer reflects who they desire to become, but only who they have been. In that moment, a decision must be made, not whispered, not wished, but declared. The decision to outgrow the former self is not a matter of luxury, it is a matter of purpose. You must force yourself, yes, force yourself, to rise beyond the level of comfort, beyond the rituals of your yesterday, and beyond the version of you that no longer serves the dream that keeps tugging at your soul. You see, your old self, with all its habits, all its familiar excuses, all its well-practiced limitations, it is stubborn. It does not go quietly. It begs you to hit snooze, to delay greatness for another day, to negotiate with fear and settle for average. And unless you exert more will, more urgency, and more resolve than that voice of complacency, you will remain in orbit around the same results. Growth is not accidental, it is earned, it is demanded. You do not stumble into your higher self, you create it brick by brick, decision by decision. You must ask yourself, what thought patterns, what daily choices, what inner conversations have kept you fixed in place? Because whatever you do not confront, you allow to control you, and what you allow becomes your identity. The mind is the first battleground. Before the body changes, before the world notices, the transformation begins in silence. You must envision a future self so powerful, so capable, so elevated that the current version trembles in comparison. Then you must become that future self before the world gives you permission. You act. You speak, you walk, you work, not as who you are, but as who you must become. Comfort is a sedative. It lulls you into postponing your evolution, but growth, real growth, is uncomfortable. It requires you to break routines, to detach from people who validate your limitations, and to make choices that feel unnatural because they are meant for a greater you. Change your inputs, change your language, change your habits, change your environment. Why? Because a new life cannot grow in the soil of the old one. Nothing blossoms in soil that has already dried up from the same patterns repeated. Do not wait for a sign. You are the sign. Do not wait for motivation. Discipline will take you further. Do not wait for certainty. Action will create the clarity you seek. And do not wait for the world to change around you. Transform within, and the world will mirror it. Force yourself to outgrow the old version of you, not later, not when it's convenient, now, because the life you were meant to live is not waiting. It is demanding your arrival. Personal transformation is not optional. It is a conscious obligation. The truth is, every individual is born with the potential to evolve, to become more, to refine their mind, spirit, and discipline. Yet most live as if change is something that happens to them rather than something they must deliberately pursue. This misunderstanding is why so many remain stuck, wrapped in routines, identities, and limitations they've long outgrown. Growth is not a random event. It is the result of intentional mental labor. It begins with a firm decision that says, I will no longer accept the version of myself that merely survives. I will become someone who thrives. The problem is that society often sells the idea that people are complete as they are. This narrative is comforting, but it is dangerous. While self-acceptance is important, self-acceptance without the pursuit of self-improvement becomes stagnation dressed as peace. It dulls ambition, quiets the hunger for growth, and makes comfort seem virtuous. But no mountain was climbed, no innovation birthed, no life revolutionized from a place of passive contentment. Growth demands friction. You must reach a point where remaining the same becomes more painful than the effort required to change. You are obligated to transform because your purpose requires it. Your future demands it. The people depending on your leadership, your service, or even your presence, they deserve the fullest version of you. This is not simply a matter of personal development, it's a moral responsibility. If you are gifted with intelligence, vision, or empathy, and you refuse to refine it, you withhold value from the world, and to do that knowingly is to live beneath your privilege and your power. The person who refuses to grow is not neutral. They are complicit in their own decline. Transformation is not something that happens while you wait. It happens while you work. That work begins with consciousness. You must become radically aware of the gap between who you are and who you could be. This awareness is not meant to shame you. It is meant to awaken you. It should confront you with a sense of urgency, a holy discontent that whispers, "There is more." The gap between potential and reality should never be ignored. It is your internal compass pointing you toward your evolution. Once you accept that transformation is a conscious obligation, excuses lose their power. Suddenly, saying, "I'm too tired," or "it's not the right time," begins to sound like betrayal. Why? Because you're no longer just living to get by. You're living to fulfill a calling that cannot be answered by who you are now, but must be answered by who you are becoming. That journey will require daily, hourly decisions to stretch your thinking, disrupt your habits, and challenge your own self-image. Most people wait for external permission to begin transforming. They wait for the new job, the relationship, the new year. But transformation does not operate on the world's calendar. It begins when you decide to become your own catalyst. That decision must be made again and again, on days you feel inspired and especially on days you don't. Discipline, not motivation, becomes the fuel of change. You must push yourself to do what the old version of you would avoid. In that resistance, new strength is built. The idea that you can coast through life and accidentally become exceptional is a fantasy. Excellence is engineered. It is forged in early mornings, difficult conversations, calculated sacrifices, and relentless mental focus. You must take responsibility for the energy you bring into a room, the thoughts you allow into your mind, and the standards you uphold in your daily life. That responsibility is not a burden, it is a privilege, because within it lies the power to create something better than what the past has offered you. To transform consciously means to become your own sculptor, to chisel away distractions, to strip away outdated identities, to refine your thoughts and shape your behavior into alignment with your vision. And like any great sculptor, you must see the masterpiece within the raw material long before others can. You must work toward it with precision and patience. Transformation is slow, often invisible at first, but always worth it. Each step forward, each resistance overcome, reinforces the truth. The version of you the world needs has yet to be fully revealed, and it is your duty to bring it to life. Old habits are the chains that bind you to mediocrity. They are silent, persistent, and deeply embedded in your identity, operating under the surface of your daily life like invisible programming. You don't often see them for what they are because they disguise themselves as routines, preferences, or simply the way I've always done things. But make no mistake, old habits are not just behaviors, they are belief systems made physical. And as long as those habits go unchallenged, they will keep recycling the same outcomes, keeping you locked in patterns of comfort and limitation. Most people underestimate the power of habit because they associate change with emotion. They believe they will evolve when they feel ready, inspired, or motivated. But emotion is fleeting, while habit is structural. Your results in life are not driven by how you feel in rare moments of excitement, but by what you repeatedly do when no one is watching. The tragedy is that many remain enslaved by habits formed in outdated seasons of their lives, habits that were perhaps once useful but are now barriers. A survival mechanism in one chapter becomes self-sabotage in the next if you fail to evolve. Habits dictate your direction. Every morning you wake up and follow a series of unconscious rituals. How you speak to yourself, how you respond to stress, how you spend your first hour, how you interact with others. These micro decisions form the architecture of your life. When these habits are grounded in fear, distraction, or avoidance, they become chains, comfortable, familiar, and toxic. They slowly strangle your potential while giving you the illusion of stability. You begin to normalize frustration, rationalize failure, and dismiss growth as something reserved for the exceptional. What makes old habits so dangerous is not that they are necessarily harmful in the traditional sense, but that they are insidious. A habit of procrastination, for instance, doesn't destroy your life overnight, but it silently kills momentum, opportunity, and self-respect. A habit of negative self-talk doesn't erupt like a storm, but it erodes your confidence like slow acid. The damage is cumulative, and because the change is gradual, it is easy to deny, justify, or ignore, until you wake up one day years behind where you could have been. To rise beyond mediocrity, you must confront these patterns with brutal honesty. Ask yourself, what do I do every day that keeps me aligned with the version of myself I no longer want to be? This question requires courage. It demands that you hold a mirror to your life and acknowledge that the enemy is not always external. More often than not, it is the internal loyalty to outdated behaviors that keeps you anchored to the past. And until those habits are disrupted, no amount of wishing, visualizing, or goal setting will result in lasting change. The brain craves efficiency, which is why it prefers habit over effort. It will always default to the path of least resistance, but growth lies in the opposite direction. If mediocrity is maintained by ease, then excellence is purchased through effort. That effort must be deliberate. You must replace unconscious habit with conscious behavior, reprogramming your mind through discipline, repetition, and emotional resilience. It begins by disrupting the loop. When you notice yourself engaging in an old pattern, stop, interrupt the process, replace it with something better, no matter how small. These small acts of resistance are the beginnings of a new identity. You cannot outthink a habit, you must out-behave it. The person you want to become does not live in your imagination. They live in your behavior. Start acting like them. If you wait to feel ready, you are still operating under the influence of your past. Your habits are not just holding you back, they are speaking for you. Every time you hit snooze, avoid the difficult task, or defer the hard decision, you are casting a vote for your past over your future. And over time, those votes accumulate and decide your destiny. Understand this, your habits are either your prison or your passport. The chains that bind you to mediocrity are not made of iron, they are made of repetition. To break them, you must become more committed to your evolution than your comfort. That means embracing temporary discomfort for long-term liberation. That means being willing to feel awkward, uncertain, even afraid, because those emotions are the signs that you are stepping out of automation and into intention, and it is only through intention that transformation begins. No one outgrows mediocrity by accident. It is a battle fought and won in the small moments. The decision to show up when it's inconvenient, to finish what you start, to say no when temptation calls. Habits are powerful not because they are dramatic, but because they are consistent. So if you want a different life, build different consistencies. The choice is yours every day. You can either remain bound by what has always been, or break the chain and construct something greater. But you cannot do both. Imagination must be followed by discipline and action. It is one thing to dream, to visualize a better life, to see yourself in a state of success and purpose. But imagination without commitment is mere fantasy. The mind has a remarkable ability to create vivid pictures of potential futures. It can show you visions of health, wealth, love, power, and achievement. But unless you are willing to do the work, those images remain locked in your mind, unmanifested, untouched by reality. The world does not reward what you think, it rewards what you execute. Many people fall in love with the idea of change. They talk about goals, share affirmations, build vision boards, and feel the rush of possibility. But the truth is, dreaming is easy. It costs nothing to imagine yourself at the top. The difficulty arises when those dreams confront the resistance of real life, when discipline must step in to make the imagined future tangible. That is the point where most people turn back. They mistake emotional enthusiasm for commitment. They confuse clarity for completion. And so they revisit the same dreams year after year, wondering why nothing has changed, failing to recognize that imagination alone changes nothing. Discipline is the bridge between thought and reality. Without it, your vision is just a wish list with no engine. You must train yourself to act in alignment with what you've imagined, even when the emotions have faded, even when progress feels slow. It is easy to take the first step when inspiration is fresh. It is far harder to keep walking when no one claps, when there are no visible rewards, and when doubt begins to whisper in the background. Yet this is precisely where growth lies, in the space where action persists beyond emotion. There is a seductive lie that says clarity must come before action. People believe they need to understand every step, every outcome, before they begin. But the truth is, clarity often comes through action, not before it. You must be willing to take imperfect steps toward your vision. Discipline allows you to act despite not knowing the full path, and each disciplined act becomes a vote of loyalty to the person you are becoming. Each time you show up, on the days you don't feel like it, you chip away at the gap between imagination and realization. Imagination without discipline creates frustration. You can see the life you want, but you can't touch it. You talk about it, but you can't experience it, and that dissonance begins to breed internal conflict. Eventually, you either give up on the dream or you give in to the grind. Those are the only two options. The disciplined person understands this. They don't wait to be motivated. They engineer habits that force momentum. They build systems that remove excuses. They know that the more frequently they act, the more skilled they become, and the closer they move toward the vision once held only in their mind. Action is not always dramatic. Often it is unglamorous, repetitive, and dull. But it is within this repetition that mastery is born. One disciplined hour each day compounds. One consistent effort practiced over time becomes a towering advantage, and that is what separates the dreamer from the doer. The dreamer imagines the result, the doer imagines the result, and then builds the structure required to reach it. Discipline transforms your imagination into a strategy, and your strategy into progress. Moreover, action backed by discipline builds belief. You begin to trust yourself not because of what you hope, but because of what you do. Self-race. Respect grows every time you keep a promise to yourself. Confidence emerges not from positive thinking, but from repeated proof that you are becoming who you claim to be. Each small act of discipline is a declaration that says, I am not waiting for my life to change. I am changing it. And that message reshapes your identity far more than any vision ever could. To imagine is to glimpse the possibility of who you could be. To act is to prove that vision right. Discipline is the price you pay for freedom. It is the structure that supports your ambition. Without it, your imagination becomes a prison of unmet potential. With it, your imagination becomes the blueprint of your new reality. When you decide that action matters more than comfort and discipline matters more than mood, you begin to separate yourself from the masses. You stop living in ideas and start creating outcomes. The world is filled with talented dreamers who never acted, who never finished, who never followed through. They had imagination but lacked the muscle of discipline. You must not be one of them. Let imagination ignite the vision, but let discipline and relentless action carry it into form. Only then does your dream cease to be an illusion and start to become inevitable. The pain of growth is temporary. The pain of regret is eternal. Growth requires discomfort, sacrifice, and at times a confrontation with your deepest insecurities. It asks you to do things you've never done, to leave behind parts of yourself that feel familiar, and to step into territory where the outcome is not guaranteed. This process is not always pleasant. It stretches you beyond your limits, mentally, emotionally, and physically. But this temporary pain serves a higher purpose. It molds you into someone stronger, sharper, and more capable. Unlike regret, which leaves you empty and longing, the pain of growth gives you something in return, transformation. When you avoid the discomfort of growth, you don't avoid pain. You merely delay it and invite a different kind. Regret creeps in slowly. It arrives not as an explosion, but as a quiet voice that whispers, "You could have been more." It is the weight you carry when you look back and realize you settled for less than you were capable of. Regret does not fade with time, it festers. It becomes part of your identity, and unlike the short-lived struggle of pushing yourself, regret carries no reward. It teaches, but it never heals. People often choose temporary comfort over the short-term pain of doing what must be done. They stay in jobs they hate, relationships that shrink them, habits that drain them, not because they truly want to, but because change is hard. And so they delay, they justify, they convince themselves that now is not the right time, but time does not pause, life keeps moving, and the longer you wait, the heavier regret becomes. One day, the discomfort you avoided becomes the reason you feel stuck, bitter, or resentful. What was once a small decision not to act becomes a life shaped by what you refuse to confront. Pain is inevitable in any life path, but you get to choose which kind you endure. The pain of discipline, of failure, of being misunderstood, of falling and getting back up. That is the pain of progress. It comes with rewards, wisdom, resilience, character, and the satisfaction of knowing you gave your best. The pain of regret, however, offers no such compensation. It is hollow. It leaves you asking, "What if?" with no chance to rewrite the outcome. And that is a suffering far greater than any challenge growth could ever bring. Growth pain has a timeline. It may last weeks, months, or even years, depending on the size of the leap you are making. But it always ends, because eventually you adapt. What was once difficult becomes second nature. The weight you had to force yourself to lift becomes the weight you now carry with ease. You develop new skills, new mindset, and most importantly, new standards. That's how growth works. It stretches you, but it doesn't break you. Regret, on the other hand, doesn't follow this cycle. It lingers and repeats. It replays the same scenarios in your mind over and over, with no end, because there's no progress being made, only reflection without resolution. Choosing the path of growth means accepting that pain is part of the deal. You will be challenged, you will be tested, you will have to do things you've never done, but every step forward builds a life with fewer regrets. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you protect yourself from the emotional cost of unfulfilled potential. That kind of decision-making compounds. One day you'll look back, not with sorrow, but with pride, knowing you didn't let fear dictate your direction. The irony is that the more you avoid the pain of growth, the more you strengthen the conditions that will eventually bring regret. Avoiding hard conversations leads to broken relationships. Ignoring your health leads to long-term consequences. Postponing your dreams leads to years of stagnation, and the deeper you sink into comfort, the harder it becomes to climb out. Growth asks for pain now, so you don't suffer later. Regret asks for comfort now and delivers suffering when it's too late to change. You must train yourself to embrace discomfort as a necessary part of development. The temporary sting of effort, failure, or discipline is a sign that you're moving in the right direction. It means you care enough to try to fight to get better. It means you value your future more than your momentary ease. When you live this way, pain no longer becomes something to avoid. It becomes something to harness. It becomes fuel. The moments you push through when it's hard are the moments that create separation between you and your old self, and between you and those who remain stagnant. Regret cannot be reversed, only prevented. And the only way to do that is to grow consciously, consistently, and without apology. Growth will test you, but regret will haunt you. Choose the temporary pain, choose the effort, choose the challenge. Because that choice is the only one that builds a life you'll never need to look back on with sorrow.